So thank you, lovely to meet you all. We're going to start off with introductions from each of the candidates, and they'll have a minute to introduce themselves. So as Howard said, I'm Corey, I'm the president of the Students' Union. So yeah, I think, shall we get started? So over to Dr. Rosanna Allen-Khan.
Hello everyone, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Tooting is in my veins, St George's is in my veins, my family were born here, my children were born here, I've served on the front line with you guys in A&E, in our NHS, I've studied in these libraries, but this isn't about the fluffy stuff which a few of us here could share. This is about the fact that last year I was elected to be the MP for Tooting. I'm an ordinary Tooting girl who's representing extraordinary people. In the simple 10 months that I have been an MP, I have defended St George's Hospital on the front line by donning my scrubs on the Christmas and Easter holidays and standing shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues. I have defended St George's in the media when they came under attack for going into special measures. I have campaigned for our NHS, for our students, for our young people, against the education cuts within the chamber and outside. I've launched an apprenticeship programme so that every single person has the best start in life. And in just 10 months, I have met with 5,000 individuals. I have met nurses who are needing to use food banks. I've met students. Okay, thank you very much, and it will be an honour to continue serving you, and I'm sure we'll talk more over the course of the hour.
Okay, on to Alex Glassbrook from the Liberal Democrats Party.
So I came into politics very late, after 21 years of practice as a barrister. And my first election was the by-election this time last year against Dan and against Rosanna. They're both good and honourable people, I'll say that straight out. They are good people to have a good fight with. A lot has changed in a year. We've had a referendum that says we're on our way out of Europe. We have a government that says that means hard Brexit. Over that year, the nature of government has changed. It's become a lot stricter and is saying what we say are some wholly unrealistic and damaging things, particularly about immigration. And the nature of opposition has changed because we say that the opposition has left the field. Jeremy Corbyn has said Brexit is not an issue. He has said that freedom of movement will not be part of a resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, on to Dan Watkins from the Conservative Party.
David to take this out. Hello everyone, I'm Dan, lovely to see you all. First time back here since a few weeks ago when my baby daughter was born in St George's, so it's a special moment for me. I'm a local business guy. I set up a business 11 years ago in the legal sector, created a lot of jobs, employ a lot of younger people. I'm also very active in campaigning in the community. I've been doing this for many, many years, for transport, for housing, for protecting our high street. I'm a friend also of St George's, helping in a fundraising capacity, and very much keen to represent you in Tooting. I love this community. I've lived here for 17 years, and indeed my wife is alumni of this great university as a social worker. So very much hope you'll give me your support on June the 8th. I mean, really this comes down to a choice of who's going to lead the country through these very difficult Brexit negotiations. Is it going to be Theresa May, who is a strong leader with a united Conservative government behind her, or a very divided, very chaotic Jeremy Corbyn?
Thank you very much.
That is the choice. Thank you.
We're going to move on to questions now. I would just like to say I'm really sorry about the temperature. I can see some people dwindling already, but bear with us. Also, if you ask questions from the audience, please make it applicable to all candidates. So we're going to kick off from a question that's been submitted earlier, and this was from one of our medical students, Yemi. And we'll start off with Dan, I think. Let's start off with Dan. Can candidates explain the problem with private finance initiatives in the NHS and what they/their party would do about them? So
Yeah, where is Yemi? Hello. That is a good question, and it's very pertinent to St George's. In principle, there are aspects of private finance initiative which was introduced by the Conservatives in the 90s and then massively accelerated by the Labour Party under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, there were elements of it that could have worked because it was getting people who were very good at financing projects and running operations to take control of some of the aspects that involve with building a wing of a hospital, which is a very complex project. Unfortunately, the projects were negotiated very poorly, and in the case of St George's Hospital, you did a deal in the early noughties under Tony Blair, and the then Labour government did not negotiate the contract very well, and you're still paying very large service payments to the operator of that, and it does drag down on your finances. So for me, the devil's in the detail. PFI could have worked. We could look at financing future expansion of hospitals here, elsewhere, with using private money, but we have to negotiate properly, and that wasn't done.
Okay, Ken?
Ken?
Sorry. Sorry, Alex. I was reading.
Never been confused with him before. The answer is that PFIs were a transplant that was never going to work because it was bringing into a public service for universal healthcare a profoundly commercial concept. And the maxim to bear in mind is that capital is a coward. Money will go where there is more money. Money will flee where there isn't profit. And both the Tories and Labour should have recognised that. It's a horrible mess. It has left trusts in serious debt for very long periods of time. It ought never to have been done. The Lib Dem proposal is very straightforward. The NHS is a universal system, so the way we propose to deal with it is by an increase in taxation. It's quite straightforward. Penny on the pound throughout the bands. It's a service for everybody, it's a public service, it should be in taxation, not in PFIs and commercial contracts.
Thanks very much. Okay, Dr. Rosanna.
Thank you, Yemi. Great question. I think we need to remember that we are where we are because of a Lib Dem Tory coalition government that came in 2010. And it was a Labour government that delivered an NHS. And it is a Labour government that is going to bring the NHS back to exactly where it needs to be. Publicly owned and funded, free at the point of use. But it's very easy to talk about history from my two colleagues next to me. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the fact that the Labour Party is the only party that are proposing how to fund it. Let's go back to the fact that the Tory government have attacked our nurses, slashing their bursaries. They're using food banks. That is outrageous. They have attacked our medical students. They have attacked our junior doctors. They have attacked the very fabric of the NHS. That is what this next vote is about. Not living in the past, but going forward and saying that it's only a Labour government that is going to bring this NHS back to exactly where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I think we'll go to first question from the audience. So if anyone's got a question, please raise your hands. Yeah, gentleman in the front.
Yes, I've always thought that no particular branch of government operates in a vacuum. In fact, I have a medical metaphor, and that is the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone, which I think is particularly apropos today. So we have a situation where we are withdrawing from the EU, and that is likely to lead to a withdrawal of businesses from the UK, and it is likely to result in a decline in the number of, or the amount of taxes that we're able to get from businesses and from individuals. So how are we going to fund a more vibrant NHS if the tax base from which the money comes is shrinking?
Would anyone like me to repeat that question? Okay. So I think the general gist of the question is how are we going to fund the NHS when the tax base is shrinking along those lines? And if we start with Dr. Rosanna.
To be very clear, when it came to voting against triggering Article 50, I broke the whip twice. I did what I said I would do for Tooting, which is stand up and be a strong local voice. And when the local population voted overwhelmingly to remain, I voted twice against triggering Article 50. You're absolutely right. Leaving the EU is an absolute disaster, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But what the Labour Party are planning to do is to invest in young people, have an industrial strategy that brings young people to the forefront of economic growth and development so that they will go on to earn and fulfil their earning potential. It's a Labour Party that's going to invest in mental health and ensure that all of those young people that can't get into work because they're not treated properly are able to get into work. That their families who have to leave to be permanent carers will be supported to get back into work. But you're absolutely right, sir. Leaving the EU is terrible for local business and the local economy.
Thank you very much. Dan, please.
Yeah, a good question, Tom, who is a very well-respected local Arcala. So I should give you a shout-out as well on that.
Do your best, Dan.
Look, I mean, firstly, just to what Rosanna said, if you think it's a disaster to leave the EU, why are you standing on a Labour manifesto which yesterday came out and said, we are leaving the EU, and also said we're leaving the single market, and also said, well, we'll have no freedom of market? You either resign and you're an independent MP, or join the Lib Dems with Alex, or so you can't have it both ways and try and take the bits and pieces you want from different political parties. Difficult decisions are definitely coming ahead, and you've nailed it on the head. The one thing we must get from these difficult EU negotiations, and I voted Remain, my business exports to the EU, I'm at the front line of this future pain if we don't get it right. We need a good trade deal. We need to protect Tooting residents' jobs and incomes, because a lot of us do rely on business done with Europe, and quite frankly the only person who's going to get a good deal is Theresa May. It is not going to be Jeremy Corbyn.
Lovely.
Okay, Alex.
Okay, well, let's get away from personality politics and to the detail of it. The penultimate report that the Health Select Committee published before the dissolution of Parliament was on the effect of Brexit on the health service. And one of the many details there, quite apart from the devastating effect of Tory punitive immigration policies, was that the Health Secretary is not a representative on the Brexit Committee. So health is not represented on the Brexit Committee. That is a horrifying, either a horrifying lack of imagination or it's deliberate, and Dan needs to deal with this and he hasn't. Secondly, on taxation, we're going to be in dire straits. The Labour proposal is to raise all the money from corporation tax, but of course that's a movable feast. You can't guarantee a certain income from taxation, but you certainly can't guarantee it from corporation tax, because corporations are very likely to try and legitimately evade tax. So that's why we put it on income tax. So there it is. Thank you.
Okay, so is there any more questions from the audience? So we'll go for Sarah. Okay, so just to repeat for anyone that didn't hear, Sarah's question was around social care and what the candidate's thoughts for improving social care was. So we'll start with Alex, please.
Yeah, it's something the Lib Dems have campaigned on for years, and indeed tried to move when we were in coalition with the Tories, but the Tories wouldn't do it. We wanted a royal commission that included not just NHS but mental and social care together, and mental health to be given parity. Now, there are shocking statistics upon how badly this is needed. For example, and in relation to women in particular, the 2014 annual morbidity survey revealed for the first time that 1 in 4 women have mental health problems. That is an unusually high reading, and yet we've got, and I was chatting to a GP friend of mine who also is the head of a GP service at a teaching hospital, and she told me that whereas when she and I qualified respectively in law and medicine, there were still spare beds, there were still some mental health provisions. Now, in her phrase, the system is falling down. And she's a very level-headed person who doesn't usually use that sort of language. So,
thank you very much, Candidate.
Thank you.
Okay, on to Rosanna.
Thank you for raising social care. It's something that I've spoken out about since being elected, and even before that on the Adult Care and Social Care Committee and the council on which I sat, where I worked as a councillor. And I have personal experience as well. In Wandsworth there are 19,000 carers that have to choose between heating and eating every single winter. Most of them are women. And in fact I felt so strongly about this that I went to speak to the World Bank about how we could deal with this globally as well as nationally and locally. And the Labour Party have pledged to invest in social care. We have been fighting it. I've been fighting it on the front bench. I've been fighting it in the community ever since getting in. And you're absolutely right about women's refuges. I have personal experience of needing to use one as a child, and I know how important they are, and they are a lifeline. But just to bring it back onto Brexit for a moment, Brexit will cause us, in not supporting our EU nationals, we are losing 80,000 carers, and they're not even being paid minimum wage in Wandsworth. And I think you know as well as I do that it's a Labour government with having a local person flying the flag with experience who can sort out the issues. Thank you.
Yeah, so social care, it's a great question. It's one of the great challenges of our age as we get older, live much longer. I supported the government raising the social care precept on local councils, which has put in £2 billion extra money as a bit of a sticking plaster over the last couple of years. And I supported the recent budget where we put another £2 billion into social care for this year. But the future, we've got to change the system. It's not working because so much is changing about our society. I think the government's on the right path with trying to integrate health and social care. They're doing the pilots across the Midlands and the north of England. This will help St George's tremendously as well. I meet with the CEO of St George's, I know Rosanna does as well, and it's a real problem for us is helping our old people get back into the community after they've recovered from an illness or an injury. So that's really important, and as your MP I want to bring that down to London in the next Parliament and start taking advantage of those benefits. And finally, I'll say one other thing. I can't talk about the manifesto, that's out tomorrow, but locally, with Springfield Hospital, that's going to get a huge investment and regeneration in the next few years. So that will be a huge asset for us going forward.
Okay, so we'll take one more question that was submitted. So this was from Mark Livingston, Student Accommodation and Welfare Advisor here at St George's. So the question is, most of our students will be looking forward to careers in the National Health Service. Many of the students I speak to have expressed concerns about the future of that institution. What would the candidates do to reverse privatisation of the NHS and ensure that it remains in the public hands? So we start with Dan.
Up again. So ultimately, the NHS is a huge organisation, very valued, much loved one, and the Conservatives are committed to it being free at the point of delivery, as I believe are all the other main parties. The question is, how do you fund it for an ageing society? The costs of it are escalating as technology gets better and we get older and iller. And it's only ever going to come from a strong economy. There's no way that you can tax people at the top end enough to generate enough incomes to put in the extra £10 billion per year that's probably needed every Parliament going forward to make the NHS successful and be able to treat this huge increase in demand. So a strong economy is crucial. You know, we have delivered that in the last 7 years, and I don't have to remind you about Labour crashing the economy in 2010 and indeed in the late 70s. You know, they don't have a strong track record on that point. But I also think it is about reforming, as I said before, integration of health and social care, key reform for the next 5 years. We've started it and we'll continue it.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much, audience. Thank you. On to Alex, please.
The problem is, whenever the Conservatives talk about the NHS, they start to use commercial terms straight away. And history is important here. The 1944 White Paper, because of course the NHS was planned whilst this country was still being bombed, spoke unequivocally of a service that was universal and was free for all. And it's not a commercial enterprise. And the problem is, with the way the Conservatives describe it, it's always trying to covertly persuade people that this is unaffordable and we ought to give it up and have an insurance-based system instead. That's the fraud of this. It should be from taxation. This is a liberal establishment. You know, this is Beveridge and Bevan set this thing up. It was a national promise. We need to pay from it from tax and ignore all this rubbish about commercial costs and why we should give it up.
We have to remember that this question has come from a student who's worried about the crippling debt that they've been put under as a result of the tripling in tuition fees. This is about a student who wants to enter the NHS, where nurses are not welcome, where junior doctors are being targeted, where our porters are made to feel unvalued. And you talk about the economy, Dan. This Conservative government in the last 7 years has borrowed more than all of the Labour governments put together over history. So I don't know, actually, I'm not going to be lectured about how to fix the NHS for our medical student colleague that's asked a question by you.
That hasn't answered the question either.
It's actually quite tough to in 1 minute where you don't get a second round.
I mean, I'm happy to talk more.
If
Rules
we're
is
happy
rules.
to talk
Happy
some
to
more,
talk more,
Yeah, so
funding
we'll
it,
go
happy.
for, there seems to be a bit more to go on. Do you want to enhance the question?
Yes, I was going to say there's a subsidiary question, if that might help, which is there are lots of discussion about how much money is going into the NHS. Everybody has different numbers, which all seem to be alternative truths. But the basic question is, if you are elected as the MP for this constituency, will you vote for the NHS reinstatement bill, and
Okay.
will you be its advocate?
Yeah.
So would anyone like me to repeat the question? No, perfect. Okay, on to Rosanna, please.
Margaret Greenwood, who's put this forward, is a phenomenal woman. I've supported her every step of the way with the NHS reinstatement bill. I was there to support her every single Friday that it was due to be read and reread, and it was a Conservative government that kept trying to talk it out, so it hasn't yet fully been listened to. But yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
Okay, Alex, please.
No, I wouldn't support that bill because I think it kicks the ball further down the road. And there's been a proposal to deal with this for years. It's the Royal Commission. Make it non-political. Make it completely non-political. The NHS was planned in the 40s at a time when average mortality was closer to 70. The financial model, the economic model, the structural model does not work for the reasons that were outlined by the earlier questioner about mental care and social health. Social dynamics have changed. It used to be the case when the NHS first started that women would tend not to claim at all. They would persist with horrible injuries often because they feared that they were going to become a cost to the family. So the whole thing has become distorted, obviously, in 70 years. I wouldn't support it. I applaud the effort to deal with it, but in my view, it's not the right solution. We need something non-political and objective, and we just need to all pause and breathe and stop fighting about it.
So to avoid repeating a lot of what Alex said, I would agree with that answer. I wouldn't support that act for similar reasons. On privatisation, gentlemen asked me about that. I mean, privatisation started under the last Labour government. It went up to 5% of all spend, and it's now at 7%, so it's modest. It's outsourcing. We are not selling assets, it's outsourcing of contracts. And I would say some of those providers, like Macmillan Cancer Nurses, are absolutely fantastic. And if we're opening a new wing or a new practice, and it's the case that a charity can provide it better or just as well as something that hospital could try and do in-house, then I personally I'm happy to see a charity run that service. So that counts as privatisation. But I think in the general public discourse, people wouldn't say that is privatisation. Because I think people look at that and say that's not someone creaming off kind of profits or actually buying an asset. It's just providing patient care, and it just happens that those people work for a charity, not for NHS England.
So the question is, how would you pay for the aspirations of your parties? We'll start with Alex.
Well, I think I said so earlier on. It's a 1% rise, is 1p rise across the tax band, and frankly that's perfectly consistent with the logic and the reason for the NHS as a universal service. Now, I contrast that with Conservatives to my left, who constantly say we won't tax and then do. It's either the universal tax credit is suddenly eroded for working families, or it's national insurance, as in the shambles in the last budget. They'll say they won't, and then they will. It's just rubbish. We're being honest about this. Now, I mean, I'm not going to play the game of trying to insult people for being chaotic, or particularly not for having a beard. But which does seem, I'm afraid, to be part of the tone of the politics at the moment. We say simply that the Labour plan doesn't seem intelligible because it all seems to be linked to corporation tax over and over again. They're spending the same money.
Okay, Rosanna, please.
Great. Let's be very clear. It's very nice to see you, Sarah. I know you're a Tory activist. I didn't know you worked here, so it's great to see you. So essentially, Labour is only talking about the top 5% of earners and taxing them. 95% of people like us in this room, are going to be no worse off. And I think if you ask anybody, indeed when I'm on a doorstep and I speak to people in my surgeries, if they're willing to pay that little bit more, if they're that much more well off in order to help the rest of us, in order for people's mothers not to have to wait 2 months for cancer treatment, in order for people not to have to use food banks, In order for children not to have to use food banks, it's gone up 25% in this area. In order not to cut school budgets, it's just the top 5% of earners. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm going to own it, and the Labour Party own it. So it's a culmination of investing in industrial strategy, so more people are back into work and they give back to the economy, income tax and corporation tax. Thank you.
So, I mean, it's a very valid question. We all want the same for the NHS and our schools and all of our other public services. We want to put more money into them. It's just a matter of how you do that, which is a very important thing to decide upon. And look, on the Labour point, £50 billion of extra taxes a year, there's 1 million people who earn over £80,000 a year. That means they're going to be paying £50,000 per year of extra tax. I'm sorry, there's no way it's going to ever be delivered. Some of these people are running businesses in multiple countries. They have flats all over the place. When they're asked to pay £50,000 more here, and they can just say, well, actually, my residence is now in New York, because they're not punishing the rich and the wealth creators, they're just going to do that. And every time we've raised taxes in this country post-war to these kind of levels, we have seen a flight of those people, and tax revenues have come down. And you might not want to hear that, but it is the truth. It is the truth. And then we won't be able to afford all the extra spending, and we won't then have an excellent NHS. So it's going to be a travesty, and another 10 years of austerity paying back the debt. Just in my last 10 seconds, just to say, it does again come back to growing the economy, which is the Conservative way, and sharing the proceeds of growth, investing that money into public services.
Okay. Lady in the front. So essentially the question was around about Crossrail 2 and how would candidates support that and support the local investment in the area. Okay, and we're starting with Dan, please.
Okay, good question. It is the big project that may or may not get signed off in the next Parliament, and as your MP, absolutely I want to see it delivered in our constituency. I did a huge consultation. We had over 3,000 local residents respond to it a couple of autumns ago, and on the basis of that there was a strong public support for having it in Tooting rather than Balham, because the opportunities for redevelopment, jobs, housing here are much stronger. So I continue to want to see it here in Tooting Broadway. We absolutely have to protect Tooting Market, which is threatened by the current plans, because an access shaft would go through the middle of it. But in the last set of plans, I worked with Roy, Tooting Market Manager, in 2015, and we met with Transport for London, and they did look at the other sites, and they only had to move it 100 metres, and then it was going to be fine. So I would say, let's do that again. There's lots of options we can do to protect Tooting Market, because Tooting is nothing but and the private sector is nothing but its small businesses. That's what we are. We don't have big private sector employers. We've got to look after our small businesses as well as our big public sector employers.
Rosanna, please.
The first thing I did when I was elected was invite the head of Crossrail 2 down to Tooting Broadway, and it was clear that the plans had changed and no one had noticed. And I was the one that noticed with my team that Tooting Market was affected. I went straight to the market, I set up a campaign, I spoke to Sadiq Khan, I wrote to the minister involved in government, and I said we have to protect Tooting Market. I set up a petition. So it is actually thanks to the work I did as a brand new MP that alerted us to that in the first place. Also, on businesses, I set up an apprenticeship programme for local businesses to take just one apprentice so that local people can learn and grow their businesses. But actually, they've been attacked by this Conservative government's business rates. So I've worked with every single business to tackle the rise in business rates. Every single business has got a letter and had a meeting with me, and I'm supporting them because they have contributed to this area becoming so great, but now they're being charged higher rents, greater business rates, and they can't survive. So you're absolutely right. Local business is the lifeblood of our economy here in Tooting.
So over 1,000 businesses have had a meeting with you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, what was that?
There's over
Thank
1,000
you.
businesses.
Thank you.
in
They had
Tooting.
to, I'm sorry, I think that's
possibly have met with
unsolicited
you.
question. We can have a discussion if you want.
No, we'll hold the discussion. Alex has still got an opportunity to stop.
I'm still here.
Good man.
I think the question was, how do you promote both? How do you deal with the public transport interest as well as the business interest? And I think the answer is, which has long been our intention, is that you make it part of a bigger plan for the High Street area. Because the absurdity at the moment is you've got a High Street area that's been totally unchanged in terms of its traffic layout. and it's dominated by motor traffic, which is not good for business because of the pollution. It's also used by many, many cyclists, myself included. It should be a much better layout. And that could be a layout that could serve all interests, frankly, because one of the things that's really going to promote more business, even more in Tooting Market, is better access. Because the access at the moment is not great. It's often noisy, polluted main street. That could be better organised. And if you look elsewhere in London, for example, those who, like me, are old enough to remember Trafalgar Square before the National Gallery became pedestrianised. If you remember that, and if you think about cycle developments, that's how you do both interests.
Okay, Jack at the back. Just to clarify, how are we going to continue to attract international students and make sure they continue to feel welcome here in the UK? So start with Dr. Rosina, please.
Fantastic question. And I have spoken to many residents actually who are students here who have come see me in my surgeries, many of them in tears because they're worried about their PhD funding. They don't feel welcome because actually they also don't, they speak with a foreign accent and they say that they don't even feel welcome on the streets post-Brexit. So I think there's a twofold issue, generally making them feel welcome, but also recognising the fact that they are losing grants, they are losing funding. When you look at how much it costs to study here, they are feeling absolutely unwelcome and they don't know how they're going to manage, and it is going to affect the brain drain. We're going to see people not coming here, and we need to. So I set up a hate crime campaign, an anti-hate crime campaign, which are targeted on student campuses, and I'm happy to work with you if I'm re-elected again to make our student body feel welcome. And as the daughter of an EU immigrant, I know just how it feels to be shouted at and attacked on the street. So we need to make sure that we bring in the greatest minds to give back here in the UK so we can learn from them as well, but also to make sure that on a personal level they feel welcome in Tooting.
Thank you very much. Alex, for me, please.
Moving from the general to the particular, and first of all with apology, one, fight hard Brexit. Sorry to ram it down your throat, but there it is, because we've got 150,000 remaining EU, as we now must call it, nationals working in the NHS. The rhetoric, I'm afraid, I don't include Dan personally in this, but the rhetoric from his party, which seems to have absorbed the far right, is horrible. That has to stop. That has to stop. You need a proper opposition. Now, to the particulars, one of the other things that's really hindering the NHS and students is the current immigration rules, particularly in relation to spouses. Because there's a provision that if you're going to work in the NHS, as some of you I suspect know, you have to be able to demonstrate if you're a non-British national that you have sickness insurance, and that's particularly true for spouses, and it is deterring people. We don't only depend upon other EU nationals, but also immigration from outside the EU. We welcome it. This is London.
Thank you very much.
Good question, and I picked up on that sentiment of people feeling less welcome on the doorsteps, people from all walks of life, and obviously it's affecting you here as well. Look, I'm an internationalist. I employ lots of people from all around the world in my business. We should live in a meritocracy where everyone is just, essentially judged on their abilities and not their background, including their nationality. And you have my absolute word that as your MP in Tooting, on the inside of government, if it is to be a Theresa May government, polls may be wrong, but if it is to be, that I will be that voice there, making that case that we need to make sure that Europeans, whether they be workers, whether they be students thinking of coming here, get a good deal out of Brexit. And I know that Theresa May will listen. She's a Remainer like myself. No, she will, with all due respect. And that actually is your choice locally. To let me finish. No, your choice locally is we are all socially liberal internationalists on this panel. Do you want someone at the heart of government who can influence things, or do you want a backbench MP?
Okay, gentleman at the back for me, please. Okay, just to reiterate, the question was around what the candidate's going to do to improve the dangers in the constituency, and I think the last bit of the question was about improving their way of life and outcomes for those individuals. Okay, so we'll start with Dan for me, please.
A very personal question. There's been a real spike in knife crimes, injuries and fatalities around the Earlsfield, Wandsworth Town area in particular. I mean, it is shocking. Wandsworth is the safest inner London borough, and then out of nowhere we see this spike in the last couple of years, and it needs to be dealt with. The police, can I just say, are doing a great job. They're catching the offenders in most of these cases, and ultimately they do have to be answerable for those crimes. But the only way we can actually prevent these crimes is through developing youth projects, work opportunities for younger people. And if you want to know, am I committed to that? Absolutely I am. I've set up a entrepreneurs grant for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, working with business launchpads so that people can get their first couple of £100 to set up a business when they've got no money at all. I work on the Youth Enterprise Summit, bringing agencies together to cross-refer people to the right person with the right challenge meets the right agency, and many other things you can see on my website. And as a final thing, I'd say, as your MP, I will lobby to see the Crime Prevention Fund, which the Mayor has recently halved for Wandsworth, to see that fully reinstated, because police budgets have been protected, and there's no need to halve a crime prevention fund at this difficult time.
Thank you very much. Over to Alex, can we please?
All of those things are important, but the one thing that underlies all this is there's an illegal drugs trade that needn't be there to a great extent. We're the only party who are talking about legalising cannabis. And the reason we're doing it is because it is legitimising a serious, violent criminal culture. And it needn't be there. Now, that doesn't necessarily solve all the problems. It's something that I know will get shouted down at. You know, people will call names, say it's ludicrous, say it's impractical. But what's the point of carrying on as we are? What's the point of putting young people in the way of convictions that make it impossible for them to get a decent job for the rest of their life? What's the point of putting people in the way of blades? I mean, I was cycling up by Wandsworth Prison past the flowers of the latest killing that are by a school that 5-year-olds go into. I mean, for crying out loud, how long is it going to take for people to actually ask, why are we losing the war on drugs?
I grew up in quite a violent community, and I, against all odds, became a trauma doctor, and I saw so many innocent lives taken. I, as a result, studied a Masters in Public Health and specialised in knife crime for my thesis, and I then worked with gangs in the UK and abroad. In my first role as a politician, I took upon myself to speak to the very young people that I see dying before me in the A&E. I had a roundtable discussion with ex-offenders and current offenders in the community, and I said, what do you need? I asked them outright. I also went and I cried with some of their parents on the Henry Prince estate. They were there on the floor, unable to get up, crippled by the grief of losing their children, and I said, what do you need? As your MP, I have already listened, and they said, we need opportunity. That's why I was proud to work with South Thames College and set up an apprenticeship programme called Take One. That is no small feat in just 10 months. But as your MP, my job is not to work for you, it's to work with you and recognise what I can learn from you.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, and then we'll have a closing from the candidates. So we'll have the lady in the back. So to reiterate that question, it was about what the candidates will do to ensure their party promotes equality in the constituency. So we'll start with Dr. Rosanna, please.
As I mentioned before, I set up a cross-party anti-hate crime campaign in Parliament called Better Than That, because Tooting is better than that. Hate crime will not be tolerated. But actually, in my capacity as the Shadow Minister for Sport, I campaign against homophobia in sport. I promoted the massive campaign called This Girl Can, that says it doesn't matter what shape, what size you are, any woman can go and achieve anything they want to in sport. I also campaigned tirelessly to protect our young children, and I worked with the government and independently as a Labour Party politician to protect our young people from sexual exploitation in sport. And I think you'll be very pleased to read the Labour Party manifesto and just how much it promotes women. And I can tell you that this is a choice of a generation. Vote for an MP who's going to follow Theresa May through the voting lobbies, pushing through the harshest possible of Brexit and not making us feel welcome, or vote for the person who has delivered in just 10 months on all of the things that you have asked today.
Me next. Yeah, and Absolutely. I mean, in terms of what I do personally in the community, I've always spent a lot of time at the temples and the mosques, getting to know the congregations, the trustees. I run projects with them. I put my time in as a volunteer to make sure that people are coming together from those congregations and from people from right across Tooting. And it makes a difference. If we talk, it makes a difference. In fact, I met Alex at the Visit My Mosque Day just the other month. And these are great occasions. And they're small things you can do, taking a lead as a politician. I think nationally at the Conservatives, Theresa May's done a lot herself as Home Secretary. It was her who opened up. Well, look, bear me out. I'm going to tell you some facts, so maybe you'll absorb them. Ultimately, it was Theresa May who ended the targeting of certain demographics through stop and search. She put an end to that. It was Theresa May who categorised anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that police forces have to record, and so that is now being tackled. So we are tackling forms of prejudice wherever they are.
Thank you very much. Okay, over to Alex, please.
Yeah, we've come a long way. I mean, I'm again old enough to remember when gay marriage was really controversial, and yet now I'm able to see gay friends of mine and their kids, and it's great, but it's an ongoing battle. I'm not going to sort of list categories. I'm just going to say there is one aspect of what will probably be a Tory landslide government's policy that I think is profoundly retrogressive, which is the proposal to reintroduce grammar schools. Now, my best friend when I was growing up is an absolute genius, could rebuild a radio when he was 5 years old, but he would not have got into a grammar school. And that would have been it for him. He and I both went to comprehensives. I went to a school where a friend of mine who ended up as a doctor going to Cambridge and is now a cancer specialist didn't peak until he was 15. The grammar school system wouldn't have allowed that. There seems to be this attitude amongst the Conservative Party, amongst very, very few policymakers, that just because they went to grammar schools and it worked for them, it's fine. It's not.
Okay, so we're going to have a 1 minute closure from each candidate, and then we'll say our farewells, I think. So we'll start with Alex.
Well, I've been in the middle. As always, it's been a pleasure to debate with everybody. The question for the next 5 years, because it is going to be a long 5 years, is do you want a decent opposition? You've had a chance to listen to the detail. This could be 5 years of personality arguments. It could be 5 years with an opposition that doesn't want to do anything about free movement, that doesn't really want to stand up against hard Brexit. And hard Brexit isn't the right label, it's extreme is the right label. Or do you need a good opposition? At one point, Dan said, you can just be a backbencher. Put me in the backbenches, I will argue for you. The backbenches is a good place to be. I will feel right at home there arguing for you. You need a good opposition. It's the Lib Dems this time.
Dan, please.
Alex is right that clearly the European issue is the issue that hangs over this next Parliament, and it's absolutely crucial that we get this right. As Tom said, we need to keep growing the economy. That is the way we can sustainably invest in public services. We need a good trade deal. I have experience of working with the EU. I can use that to help us achieve what will be very difficult negotiations and get an outcome that protects local jobs. Without that, I think it's going to be incredibly tough for the country. And that's where I stand on the European position. That nominally, Labour and Conservatives have the same position on Europe. The difference is the leader who is trying to achieve the best deal for all of our people. And we have to remember that it is all of our people across the whole of Britain, however they voted. Theresa May is right in the middle spectrum of the Remain and Leave debate as a Remainer, and we need to bring people with us. And with due respect, Labour's party on Europe is all over the shop with different MPs picking and choosing. So I can be that moderate voice in government, influencing in our interest.
I've been proud to be your MP for 10 months. As I said, I'm an ordinary woman representing extraordinary people. I've already shown that I've got what it takes to stand up for Tooting. I voted twice against triggering Article 50 because that's what you asked me to do. If re-elected as your MP, I will continue to fight for our NHS. I will continue to fight for our young people, whether it be students or people just needing that first chance in life. I will campaign against the £15 million worth of education cuts that have come to Wandsworth schools. I will make sure that I continue our apprenticeship programme, and I will make sure that I fight Theresa May's extreme Brexit every step of the way. You guys will know. Turn on Parliament TV, you'll see. I'm not afraid to bring the fight to the chamber, and I'll do it again and again. And whether you vote for me or not, please use your vote and use it wisely. Thank you.